Oh, I like it.
Yeah. Hello and welcome. Welcome to Communication RX, a place where you can get prescriptions for all of your communication needs. And I'm Robin Hatcher, and I am so excited today because I am here with a guest, Henna Pryor. Hi, Henna.
Hi, Robin. It's nice to see you again. We were lucky enough to see each other in person just a few days
I
ago.
know,
So
it was
great
great.
to
We're
be
both
here.
members of National Speakers
Yeah.
Association, so we met each other in person, and we are here today to give a new prescription. And
Yes.
that prescription, Henna, is about persuasion, influence, and awkwardness.
Yes. That
So
last one probably throws people for a loop. We're like, I didn't think that's where we were going. That's where we're going.
totally. So we're going to save that one. You have to listen up
Yeah.
and figure out where that fits into the equation. But first,
Yes.
Hannah, tell us all a little bit about you, your background, and all the juicy details of what is important for us to know about Henna Pryor.
Sure. I try not to go too deeply into my origin story, but quick origin story. Firstborn daughter of immigrant parents. My dad was born in India. My mom was born in Pakistan. I was the first one born here in this country, land of opportunity. The child who would get to do all the things for the first time that my parents didn't get to do, and so I, was kind of that textbook overachiever, tried to get all the good grades, tried to, be in all the important clubs, the science Olympiad, the math league, sort of the caricature of the firstborn South Asian child. And my first job out of college was in public accounting. I worked for Ernst & Young, was good at it. Do not have the personality to be an auditor, in no surprise to anyone. Yeah, I know, really. And switched into what ended up being my 14-year career, which was professional staffing. So I did kind of search, executive search, headhunting for mostly finance and accounting, but a lot of professional level roles in different organizations. And that experience, those 14 years, decade and a half, is what really fed my hunger around performance, around how we work, around what makes us tick. And ultimately that job was sales. So it was very heavily rooted in persuasion, influence, learning what makes people move to action when they're resistant to it. And it informs a lot of the work that I do now. And I've had my own business now. I started Priority Group in late 2019, early 2020. And it has been a wild rocket ship ride of the last 3 years, of which I have enjoyed every second. And I am super grateful.
That's so wonderful. So, it just made me think when you were talking about staffing, it
Mm-hmm.
must be so, like, I work with a lot of financial advisors. I work with like people that come to me to work on their interview skills. So what did you see,
Mm-hmm.
were the make or breaks when it came to like who it is that wanted to hire,
Yeah.
what they did right, what they did not so right, and how do you know the difference?
Yeah, yeah. There's a few things I think that really contributed to the people who went far and then the people who, you know, perceivably fell behind. It was a preparation. Like I know that's easy, it's an answer that's easy to latch onto, but truly people underestimate how much good preparation makes a difference, and not on the obvious stuff, not just how do I sell my skills to this position, but learning about the people that are going to be interviewing you, doing a little bit of a LinkedIn profile view or a Google search, right? Just some of that preparation. And then the second thing, which I think is a little less obvious, but I really saw this play out in my 14 years, was a willingness to be yourself, both when it was being, boastful and bragging in the appropriate ways about your strengths, and also being willing to say, I don't have the right answer right now. And I couldn't remotely tell you what I would do given that situation, but I'm going to try. So let's try this on for size, right? Just that willingness to be yourself and not just the facets that you think people are going to want to hear, but in all facets. Those are the people that really went the furthest in my observations and staffing.
I love that. I love that, because it's such an important thing. It's like, and especially what you said is like so many people who will come to me for interview training and have no clue on how to sell themselves, or
Yeah.
it's like this is like a lot of people think, oh, that's a woman thing. It's not. I've had
No.
men have the same issues, like digging is like, okay, so but why are you great for this job?
Mm-hmm.
And it's there, they know it, but they don't know how to bring it out. They don't know how to connect the dots in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
love that, what you said about being clear about if you don't know everything, you just don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think just what you said reminded me of, my second TEDx, which hopefully will be coming out soon. One of the things that I dig into the research on is, people are hesitant to brag about themselves. And especially now in this hybrid world, we have to, right?
Exactly.
We have to. And so I saw that for 14 years in staffing when people would go on interviews and they'd struggle to do that. And now I would say even more so, it is critical to be able to do that, for people to be able to see you as competent. And so there's still this delta, this gap between the things we need to do and the things we want to do.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I'm sure there's a lot of brain science around why it is that we do that. And I about that, but one of my favorite quotes, I'm sure you're familiar with it, Guy Kawasaki, or if you don't toot your own horn, don't complain that there's no music. And I
love that. Yeah.
I was like, didn't get the job. I didn't get the job. There's nobody, it's like,
I actually had not heard that quote, and I'm going to make sure I write that down. I love that. It's so good. Awesome.
Yeah.
My notes said Guy Kawasaki toot. That's how I'm going to remind myself.
Exactly.
What to Google later.
I could go another way, but we're not going to go there.
Separate podcast.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Now, there's something that you wrote in your bio that you are talking about modern persuasion and influence. So I'm curious, it's like, what makes it modern versus, I guess the opposite would be old fashioned.
Yeah, I love the question. What makes it modern is that the old way where we used to think about this, the way we've thought about it for a long, long time, which is not ineffective. I just think it's incomplete. Mm-hmm. The way we used to think about persuasion and influence is largely based in this idea of, how do we make things sound better to somebody? How do we, make the offer sound more appealing, or the environment sound more attractive? Or, how do we add some more benefits and features onto the thing to make it sound good? How do I, brag about myself? How do I talk about the things that are useful for people to know so that they can then get excited and make a decision? And that is not wrong. That is not wrong. But the thing that's lacking in the modern world is that, this thing happened to us in the last few years, this very big thing that has changed the way we all behave. And so that sort of emphasis on the data, the fuel, we call it, is half the equation. This is the equation that we forget about and we don't spend enough time on, is addressing the resistance and the friction. And I do hear, sales trainers and people who talk about persuasion and influence about, I've heard expressions like, you got to break through the zone of resistance. You got to be able to, handle people's objections. And it used to be that you could do those things with some simple phrases or language. But ultimately what happened during the pandemic is we got really tired of people trying to push things on us. Our freedoms were restricted for better in many ways. It was a very scary time. We had to be very responsible as a society, but there's new data and new research that a lot of it comes out of Northwestern. There's two professors there that have done some brilliant research about frictions and resistance. Right. And most persuasion and influence conversations do not spend enough time focusing on the friction and the resistance. They go all in on the fuel, and then they wonder, how come people aren't changing? How come they're not open to my ideas? And so a lot of the modern take is rooted in that.
Yeah, interesting. Because I just did a show, actually, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, on Cialdini's.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that, and that still works. That's still, I think, relevant. And but when you're talking about friction and resistance, the other thing is, I think people have gotten so much savvier to the common sales pitches that they really, you can smell them kind of a mile away, even if whatever worked before is like, I know when somebody, even just a headline, just a subject line, I can tell, I can smell that it's a sales pitch, so, we do have to shift things a bit, not only because of the pandemic, but because our brains, just our neural pathways have been formed in a certain way that understands, X means Y, I know exactly what you're going here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're exactly right. I mean, I think it's a product of the information world that we live in, right? It used to be, Daniel Pink talks about, we used to live in an era of information asymmetry where, 10 years, 15 years ago, we who are in the positions of persuading, whether we're sellers, whether we're leaders trying to convince our teams of something, we would say things, to your point, we would say things to those people. And for them, it would be the first time they've heard it, right?
Right.
Or we had more knowledge than they did. We had the expertise, we had the upper hand in that we know what's best in this situation. They don't.
Right.
Now we live in an era of information parity, which means everyone thinks they know everything because all the information is out there. Like, you're telling me that this job is better for me. Well, Google says
Right.
X, right? You're telling me that this is the reason I should buy your product. Well, according to Google, 20 other people are saying this, right? So that is exactly right. The things that used to sound unique to us no longer do, and so we have to do a lot of extra work to address some of the hidden fears, the hidden resistance, the hidden barriers, in order to be effective, equally as effective as we could have been 10 years ago.
Yeah. And that, I mean, it's slightly off point, but it reminds me of another thing that all this information has done is, like, I feel like it's robbed us of that curiosity gene, and I really feel like, and to your point about even the staffing, when people don't do their research, because it's like people aren't as curious anymore, because
Yeah.
I really feel like, and I experienced this, with the a long time ago, millennial assistant.
Mm-hmm.
I met for the first time in person, and we were on our way somewhere, and I realized, so I'm talking to him, asking, but I realized the entire trip, probably been an hour, she did not ask one question,
Wow.
and it just started, like, I noticed it within 15 minutes. I thought, okay, I'm going to just see how long this goes on. And it's just really
Yeah.
amazing how, like, curiosity is such an important muscle that you need to have in order to understand or connect even. And when that's gone, because I really started thinking, because why should she could just Google whatever.
Right. Right. I mean, I think, and that's exactly right. I think a lot of what this modern persuasion and influence conversation is hinging on is this idea that to discover resistance, to discover the real friction underneath, it requires a bigger dose of curiosity, and not just surface curiosity,
Right.
deeper curiosity. But you're exactly right. We live in an era right now where, friction reduction is prioritized. We don't want to create extra questions, extra conversations. We want the easy button. We want the Amazon one click. We want the dates to swipe right. We don't want to have to do things that are an extra step, an extra lift. It's a product of modern society. And, in the book, I've just kind of recently was in this research, so it's very top of mind. Ancient cultures loved bumps. They loved adversity. They praised it. Stoicism, all the world religions, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, they all praised Greek mythology, praised, they respected adversity and bumps. And we're in this culture that optimizes for smoothness. And so it's very difficult for, especially the other generations, the millennials, et cetera. They're not programmed for it. It's not their fault. They're just not programmed for it.
Yeah, exactly. They are not. It's like a muscle is missing. They have that other great qualities, and then that is missing. Just think of something else. I don't remember what it was now. I don't know. Maybe
it'll come. It'll come.
It'll come back to me. But also, all of you watching, Henna and I are speaking at a conference together. Well, not together, but at the same conference. And whenever you're watching, this is going to be in March in Dallas for Women's Food Forum. And their topic is Limitless You. So, if you're a woman in food, check it out. WFF, Women's Food Forum. And I want to get to the A word that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, the A word doesn't sound like it's going to be something good, but it is better than the other A word. We're going to talk about awkwardness, my favorite topic.
Yes. So tell me your take on awkwardness and why it's your favorite topic.
Yes, I love to talk about this. It's funny. I did not think I was going to go all in on awkwardness, but I realized a couple of years ago that what was, part of my story to success wasn't necessarily just based in fear or traditional discomfort. It was rooted in something that felt a little more specific than that. And when I really dug in, I realized that I always felt awkward. And people who meet me now struggle to believe that, which I understand. I think it's a very different perception I throw off, not because I've eliminated it, but because I embrace it, because I loudly snort and, in the middle of professional meetings, and I giggle and cackle, all the time. But my whole life, I felt incredibly awkward. Firstborn of immigrant children, didn't dress like everyone, didn't have the same food in my lunchbox. There was always an aroma coming out of my lunchbox with the food that I was bringing to school. Boys did not like me. God, I wanted boys to like me. I was not their choice in high school. Only once I started to get into college, like second or third year of college, do I think I found my way a little bit more, and maybe a little bit of that confidence, which then translated to that. But the confidence didn't come from this sudden, oh, I'm the swan that has emerged. Not remotely. The thing that changed for me, the flipping point for me, was that I stopped trying to fight all the awkwardness that I felt and leaned into it. Mm-hmm. And awkwardness uniquely comes from a very unique situation. It's a self-conscious emotion. It is when the person we believe ourselves to be, right, our true self, is confronted, usually due to an unplanned situation or a sketchy negotiation or a conversation we didn't expect. It's confronted by this version of ourselves that we think other people are seeing. Mm-hmm. So that those two selves are in conflict, and all of a sudden we feel awkward, mm-hmm. right? And so we'd rather avoid, or we'd rather run away, and we'd, just as soon turn away and go in the other direction. But what I tended to find was that the more I would lean into my awkwardness, the more I would move forward anyway and take the little risks that would help me take the new job, pivot my career, talk to the guy, right? Everything changed when I stopped fighting it and started just living it. And so I decided to go all in on the research. I wanted to learn who else feels this? What are the things that make this a superpower instead of a deficiency to fix? And the stuff I've learned has been nothing short of fascinating. So I'm excited to talk more about it.
Yeah, that's really interesting, especially because I had a similar thing. Like my literal nickname growing up was Shy, and people refused to believe that. But I was completely shy, and even looking anybody in the face. But so leaning into that's really cool. So tell us more about that, and tell us what the research showed.
Sure. So there's tons of research around it. I would say some of my favorite research and what ended up being kind of the backbone of the TEDx of the same topic. So that one is out. The first TEDx, which is about this, is ultimately what awkwardness comes from is a conditioned set of beliefs, right? So young kids don't feel awkward. They don't. It's something that we start to learn. It usually kicks up around age 8. Mm-hmm. That we start to notice what are the social norms, what are other people expecting of us, and we start to look for who we are through those social norms, right? Even if I want to snort laugh right now, are other people going to think that's weird, right? If I want to eat this weird food with my steak with ketchup on it, like, are people going to think that's odd, right? We start to become very aware of other people's social approval, which there's millions of studies on we're tribal creatures, we crave belonging. But what's interesting is that as we continue through adulthood, that need for approval, that need to kind of fit in with those social norms really kicks up. And it kicks up at every transition point. So when we enter high school, when we enter college, if we go to college, when we enter our first job, when we start to move into leadership for the first time, every time we're in those little transitional moments of our life, outside of the accidental awkward interactions, every time we get into those transitional moments, our awkwardness really kicks up because we start scanning again for that social approval. And so one of the claims and sort of the assertions I make in the TEDx is, there's a little bit of a seesaw happening. It's we let our desire for other people to approve outweigh whether we personally improve. And so that relationship understanding where our awkwardness kicks up, where it kicks in, and then where it holds us back, where it starts to kind of hold our feet down, is such an important exploration for people that see their potential over there. They want to go make their dreams come true. They want to take the risks that are move them in the right direction, but their awkwardness keeps holding them back. So there's tons of interesting stuff that came out of it.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And because the mind is so set up to be prideful, it's really challenging to overcome that deep desire to fit in, because like ostensibly, if you do not fit in, you die.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's that's where that all is coming from. So what are some of the steps that people need to take? So some of the listeners are totally feeling awkward. How on earth are we supposed to learn how to lean into this crap? So that
So I'll give you one of my favorite little pieces of data that kind of came through the research for the book. One really helpful awareness step, I don't encourage people to just push through discomfort and just, do it anyway. Like there's a little bit of that. Yes. I think taking action definitely beats waiting for confidence to come. Right. But I think there's some awareness that's really helpful first. So one of my favorite pieces of data is around something that they call EEE, discovering whether you are easily empathetically embarrassed. And so what this is start to notice, are you the type of person that literally has a wash over you when someone else is feeling awkward, when someone else is feeling embarrassed? And interestingly, it's the people who tend to have the highest amounts of empathy for others that start to really feel that about other people. Now, it's not everyone, but you'll notice sometimes one of the examples I give in the book is cringe comedy is a genre of comedy, right? Think about America's Funniest Home Videos or Borat, 40-Year-Old Virgin, things like that. Some people love those movies, right? They're like, this is hilarious. They make me feel so much more normal. Other people watch those and they're like, I can't. Oh my God.
That's me.
I just need to, right? It's like, I need to go into this comforter and never come out. This is literally making my body have like a reaction, right? If you are one of those people for whom you have a very strong reaction to other people's embarrassment, their awkwardness, their cringe moments, it is usually a sign that those moments are triggering something in you that would often be difficult for you to deal with. And sometimes that empathy is useful. Like if somebody really, has an issue where they could use your help going forward, I want people to be empathetic. But sometimes instead of being embarrassed with people, we are embarrassed for people. Like they don't care. So why are we taking that on? Right. So there's some interesting awareness exercises that I frame up in the book that we can do to start to think, okay, if I want to get comfortable with my own awkwardness and use it more as a weapon and be more purposeful with those things, let me first step back and figure out what is my relationship with other people's awkwardness and start there. It's a neat exercise to do for those that have never done it.
That's cool. That's interesting. Yeah. I just don't find it funny. I feel like I don't empathize.
Yeah.
Like, why?
Sure. Yeah.
But interestingly, and I don't know if it's related, but I have a huge sense for fairness. It's like I have this like incredible ability to see that this person is not being treated fairly. So it's like it's really interesting. So I feel like that definitely hints as well.
Yeah, you don't take on their embarrassment or awkwardness, but your sense of sort of justice and fairness kicks up.
Yeah, exactly.
That's interesting. Yeah.
It's fascinating. All this is so fascinating. So and that other thing about leaning into awkwardness, that this came to me, and I think there's like a fine line. It's like, where is that line between saying, yeah, I'm going to own my awkwardness, and that line between imposing your awkwardness and saying like, take it or leave it? Like I'm always in that fine line. It's like, that's why I have this big reaction when people keep saying, be your authentic self. It's like, but
Yeah. No, I'm with you. And there's a lot of discussion that I make sure to incorporate around, know your audience, know your room, right? Like psychological safety is an important contributor to whether you can bring your whole self to work, right? And I think anybody who doesn't paint that part of the picture is doing everyone a disservice. It is not safe for everyone to be their authentic, awkward, stumbly, fumbly self at work. And, marginalized groups will not get the same passes for those things or might have misinterpretation. So one of the distinctions I make quite early is awkwardness is not the same as ineptitude. Right. Those are not the same thing. Ineptitude is a failure or a inability to execute on certain things. So I would not want to hire an inept contractor to work on my house, but I'd be perfectly fine hiring an awkward one. Right. So it's not about ineptitude. And it's also not necessarily about vulnerability. There's a distinction. There's a lot of overlap between awkwardness and vulnerability, but vulnerability offers a much greater amount of emotional disclosure, emotional exposure. By definition, vulnerability requires more of that. I view awkwardness as a slightly gentler stepping stone, an invitation to vulnerability. So to be able to say in a conversation, hey, I don't really know the answer right now, or to be able to, a little bit more gently offer hey, this is awkward, but I'm going to pick this, thing off of your face that's hanging, a little bit of lunch, right? It's typically not the full on aggressive, kind of in your face version of it, but still to your point, test in slower stake or lower stake situations or slower moments. Don't go all in on, I'm just going to let the freak flag fly unless you've tested the environment a little bit first.
Exactly. Excellent. So I can't believe our half hour is almost up.
It flies.
Great. I know. So what are you going to be sharing at WFF at the conference?
Yeah. So interestingly, it's going to be on this topic. So the keynote is called Awkward and Upward. And essentially the through line is, how do we use our awkwardness to help us take more risks at work, to be braver at work? My goal is that people stop seeing this quality, this trait as something that they need to get rid of and eliminate, and start to understand that they can actually wield it like a weapon and be really purposeful with it. And so it's really the exploration of how we do that. So very excited.
Yeah, me too.
What about you? What are you speaking on at WFF?
Yeah, mine is called Invisible to Invaluable. Get seen, get heard, get ahead.
Love it.
It's like really bringing out your inner value and advocating for it, communicating for it, and ideating the perfect you that you want to step into.
I love it. I think I think the combination of all these sessions are going to land really well. People are going to have no excuses not to be their best selves. I can't wait.
I think their CEOs are going to have to look out.
Yeah.
They're coming for your job.
I know. That's funny. Fiery ladies. We're going to bring it. I can't wait. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. So how can people get in touch with you? Tell us about Priority and how people can get in touch with you.
Yeah, LinkedIn is my favorite playground. I always say that that's where I like to stomp around and live the most. So I believe to this day, I'm still the only Henna Pryor. So please, follow me there, link up with me there. My website is either Priority Group with a Y, or they can just go to hennapryor.com. It'll redirect to the website. I am on Instagram as well, Henna Pryor. And I love making new friends. So, if any listeners that are hearing this and something resonates, I share updates on the book. I share all sorts of behind the scenes stuff. And so I'd love to know folks in your audience, Robin. I feel like your people are my people. So let's be friends.
Totally. Fantastic. So reach out to Henna Pryor, any of those places, and be sure to check out and look for her TEDx talks.
Yes.
They're going to be fabulous. So thank you so much, Henna. It's been wonderful talking to you. And
it was a pleasure.
I can't wait to see you in